Welcome to Metal Appreciation class. If my background looks a little different, that's because I'm on vacation in Michigan. But the truth is, I still love you guys, so I couldn't stop making content. In this video, I'll be breaking down Metallica's Enter Sandman. What makes this track the most popular song ever recorded? I'll be covering the song's history, music theory, and even emotional themes. Grab a front row seat and let's take a look at this incredible work of art. By the way, you don't want to miss out on your Discord access. You can check that out below. I've got a live chat, music theory quizzes, you can share your own music, and more. Enter Sandman was released on the Black Album back in 1991, and I remember when this came out, it absolutely blew my mind. The sound was incredibly visceral and heavy, and I would listen to it over and over again, like 69 times. The music was intended to take a more commercial direction than their previous albums. And the truth is, this creative shift brought metal to the masses like never before. The lyrics explore the dark side of Western folklore's Sandman mythology. This was a character who terrorizes children with nightmares. What a great thing to write a song about. Now, the Black Album would become Metallica's best-selling album to date, with 31 million sales. Just to give you an idea, Metallica's entire catalog, their total units sold is 125 million. So that's like almost a third of everything. Now, the truth is, the Black Album would create a division between Metallica fans. In the first group, you got everyone who likes everything up until the Black Album. And in the second group, you have people who like the Black Album and beyond, the more commercial side of Metallica. Now, regardless of which side of the fence you fall on, Enter Sandman is the most well-known metal song ever recorded. In fact, as of the recording of this video, Enter Sandman has 1.4 billion with a B plays on Spotify. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and hang tight, because in the next segment I'm going to be breaking down the music theory behind this epic track. It is time to investigate the musical structure of Enter Sandman. This is fucking fascinating. It goes so deep. What I mean by musical structure is the keys, the chords, and the scales at play. Enter Sandman is in the key of E minor. So what the hell does that mean? Well, here is the key of E minor. And as you can see, there's one sharp that we have right there. And that sharp is F sharp. Of course, F stands for fudge, tastes good. So if we look at the circle of fifths, you can see all of the musical keys represented. And don't get overwhelmed by this. The only thing we're really interested in here is the key of E minor, which I don't know why I was circling E. I got confused between E major, which is this one, and then E minor over here. So the major keys are on the outside of the circle, and the inner circle where the cool kids hang out is the minor keys. So E minor and G major are relative to one another. They share the same notes. Now, all this is meaningless until you get an actual feel for it. So what I'm going to do is cue up a drone. And a drone is just a repeated or sustained pitch. This helps us absorb the mood, the vibe of the key of E minor. So check this out. Here's the notes in the key of E minor. And you can see I have E Aeolian here, which is just an interchangeable term with minor. So as you have the drone going, try playing your scale and try playing each note nice and slow and absorb the emotional content of each pitch. Let it sink into your soul and transform your internal state. Each one of those notes has its own push and pull and tension and release. It's obviously a sad sounding scale, right? Which we prefer as metalheads. That flat 6th degree is really nice. 7th degree leading back to the 1. Now, Enter Sandman in particular uses the E blues scale. So even though it's under the overarching key of E minor, there's a little bit more nuance that we need to investigate. So here is the E blues scale. There's 6 notes in this scale. If you're familiar with the pentatonic scale, we're just adding 1 extra note. And that note is a very important note. It's the devil's note. And I'll explain that in a minute. So here's the blues scale, right? 12, 15, 12. There it is. Diabolos in musica, the devil's note. The 5th, the 6th. Back to the root. So that scale is really our meat and potatoes for the Enter Sandman vocabulary. Now, I want to talk about the structure and the template that Enter Sandman uses. It's a theme and variations format, and this is really, really powerful. You can think of Pachelbel's Canon in D, the classical piece, as being a good example of this compositional structure. And a lot of songs use this. And, you know, one thing that I hear oftentimes when I'm talking to composition students is, okay, Shred, I've got a great riff, but now what? What's the next step? Where do I take this thing? And this track, Enter Sandman, has all of the answers to your questions. There's 5 levels to the Enter Sandman riff. It starts with that quiet blues lick, as we're about to learn more about, and then it grows gradually, step by step, into this massive explosion of intensity. There's a real crescendo dynamic at play, and if you're ever thinking about, you know, what's the best way to write your own music, consider this template where you start kind of down here, and then you gradually grow and build until the song reaches a feverish pitch. We're going to see this play out in the first minute and a half or so of Enter Sandman. There's different instruments that enter, right? It just starts with that electric guitar riff, and then Lars enters the scene along with Jason Newsted on bass. And there's a very strong pedal tone structure, and that's that recurring pitch that we discussed earlier. And I want to really emphasize that because that's the number one tool that you have as a composer to get an idea going. Always, always, always use pedal tones to initiate your creative flow. Now let's get into the song itself. I'm going to play the first part of it. Check it out. And this is the music video. What a classic. Now here is riff 1. This is the first thing that we hear, and it continues throughout the introduction as a foundation, a structure to build upon. It almost like induces a hypnotic state. And the way I play it is maybe a little different than you've seen in other tabs, but this just makes it so the notes sustain. So I'm playing the G string open. Of course, that's our favorite string to finger. And that seed right there is something we're going to grow and grow and grow until it reaches just an insane level of intensity. I want to point out that right there is the devil's interval, the flat 5 degree. So, I mean, it really sets this sinister tone, right? And then there's a resolution that happens when you get to that 5th fret. Now, once Hetfield reps that lick for a couple of laps, something happens. We have an instrumental entrance. Actually, there's two instrumental entrances. We have Lars on drums and Jason on bass. Let's listen to that. Okay, so we just went from level 1 there to an additional level of intensity. We're gradually building. That's that crescendo dynamic I referenced earlier. Something is about to happen next. We're going to get an electric surge of energy from a distorted guitar entrance. Listening to this song is like watching a good movie. There's constant plot points happening. Action is around every corner. When you write a song, you don't want people to be bored, and you don't want to just say the same thing over and over again. Whenever a loop comes back around, try to add an additional element to increase the interest. So let's see what's about to happen next here. Whoa! So check it out. Here we go, riff 2. This is our first distorted electric guitar entrance here. And it's just a bunch of pedal tones. And again, a pedal tone is just a repeated pitch that serves as a reference to the root. It's a strong foundation to build upon it. It gives your music context. Don't skip the pedal tones. Like, if you're just constantly changing notes, people don't have a sense of grounding. So it's just the open E string here. With that little slide leading in. That's the same note, right? E and E. So we're really going out of our way here to emphasize that E is the tonal universe of this song. You know, Bob Rock and James Hetfield and the boys, when they're in that North Hollywood studio writing and recording this music, really understood the engine of a song, what drives it forward. It's that pedal tone. Now let's see what happens next. Let's just back it up a little bit. So that's riff 2. Okay, there is another riff. Riff 3. There's so much going on in this song, and it's constantly moving the story forward. We're always getting an additional element of interest to pay attention to. Basically, what this song does is work backwards from the main theme. So we all know the main theme, and we're going to get to that in a second. But each riff that's occurring is getting a little bit closer to that main theme. And you can see in this next variation, we've got a little bit more of the sketch filled out, right? This part here. And we've got that octave that we played before, but now we have the introduction of the devil's note, that flat 5. And also the flat 2, which makes things evil as fuck. And to be quite honest, you could really classify this particular phrase as being in the Locrian mode, which is the most evil of all scales. So check this out, right? Here's the E Locrian mode. And I want to just play this for you real quick to get the vibe. And it's got a very diabolical sound. Very unrestful. Just let that soak in. Flat second, minor third. The fourth, Diabolos in Musica, flat 6, flat 7, back to the root. So that's the underlying harmonic framework that's going on at this stage in Enter Sandman, and it's wicked as fuck. Now let's move on to riff 4, see what the boys have for us. There it is. Now, did you catch that? There's just one extra note added in this level. So we were just in riff 3 right here, and that's how that riff looks. But look at this down here. Here's riff 4, and you can see that this is the only difference. That one note. So this idea of just slowly adding notes, building the tension, escalating, it doesn't take much, you know? It's kind of the less is more strategy. Sorry, Yngwie Malmsteen, this doesn't really apply. Your theory doesn't apply here. But it's an incredibly effective way to increase the intensity of the music. And we're getting close to unveiling the main theme. But yeah, like I said, we just add that one extra pitch. So that resolution, root, flat 5, the regular 4th degree, and then again, that ominous flat 2nd. It's time for the big reveal. We've gone through 4 levels of this riff, and next we're going to achieve enlightenment with level 5. Just a level 666 surge of metal power. This is the point of maximum intensity that we've now reached, and everything's turned up to 11. We got all the power chords going on, the drums, the bass, everything is just maxed out. Now here it is, the full Enter Sandman riff, the main theme. This, I mean, I don't think there's any other metal song that has this level of familiarity. You know, every metalhead knows this main riff here. The riff begins with what we've heard before. However, you can see that we're adding in the full E minor power chord there. Before we were just chugging on the open low E. So you can already hear a difference there. You know, that's definitely heavier than that. Okay, what else is new here? Of course, there's the tag that comes in at the end with these really cool power chords. That creates a perfect loop to kind of turn things back around and set us up for another repetition of the riff. Enter Sandman is the most powerful songwriting template. I use ideas from this song all the time. Whenever you hear some of my original music on social media, I'm thinking about this idea of the crescendo, the dynamic build, and also how to say the same thing in different ways. You know, how to have a riff with various levels to it. It starts with that small seed, and then you grow it into a fire-breathing dragon. Now, in the next segment, I'm going to record an original song based on the ideas in Enter Sandman so we can apply each one of these concepts. Welcome to part 4 of Metal Appreciation class. In this segment, I'm going to record an original song to apply the concepts we've learned thus far. We'll be using the Enter Sandman template for this track. You know, things like the theme and variation structure, the crescendo throughout the song. Step 1 will be a Guitar Pro transcription. This gives you the song seed and the MIDI data that we can apply in step 2 to import into our DAW, or digital audio workstation. At that point, I'm going to add some basic tracks, drums and bass. Step 3 will be adding the guitar part. So we'll have the song seed, or that intro riff that's going to be, you know, based on the Enter Sandman idea. I'm going to be adding some atmosphere. We're going to talk about the stereo field, dynamics, and effects. I'll have a main riff. We'll cover double tracking, And then we're going to have a melody and even a counter melody. The compositional process for me starts with my guitar. I'll be sitting on the couch, chilling out. You want to have like a low stress environment to encourage that creative flow. And that's how I came up with this riff here. It's based on that Enter Sandman idea. Hopefully you can hear that. Sorry, James Hetfield. I stole it from you. And once I get an idea going, I come into Guitar Pro and I write it out. And this is something that takes a little bit of work to learn how to do. You have to kind of get your ear training together. But it's very, very powerful because now you have a transcription of what you've done. And as you can see, or as you're going to see later, you can import this into a DAW and assign the MIDI information to any instrument that you like. So we start here with the open low E string, and it's a pickup. So you have this 3-beat rest, an 8th note rest, and then we start. It's just that little jump right before the measure begins, and this gives us like a little jolt of energy. Rhythm is such an important part of the musical process. So we're going to tie these two notes. And then it goes to an octave E. We have the 9th B, the 5th B. And then we're going to come to this flat 6 sound, which is really cool. And we land on an A there. That's going to be a quarter note. Rhythm is really the hardest part about transcribing, I think you'll find. Knowing the notes, is one thing. And it's a great fretboard exercise, too, if you want to learn to handle your hardwood on level 420, right? To transcribe, you have to know which notes you're playing. But then, after that, you have to know where they fall in time. So next, let's see, we're going back to 8th notes, and that's really the song seed right there. After that point, it repeats back to the E. So let's see if we did this right. Yeah, okay, good. And really what I'm outlining here is an A minor chord in second inversion, which is just a beautiful chilling sound. Now once you get your idea transcribed, you can come up here to File in Guitar Pro and go to Export MIDI File right there. And this is an absolute game changer because now we can take the information here and import it into our DAW or digital audio workstation. I use Logic Pro, but I know you guys in the Discord chat use a variety of DAWs. There's Reaper out there, there's Cubase, Ableton, and a lot of other options as well. Now, here's step 2 of the process. I'm going to drag the MIDI file that I exported from Guitar Pro into Logic Audio. And just drag it in. It's going to ask you if you want to import the tempo. I'm going to say no for now. And then I'm going to assign it to the harpsichord. The harpsichord is an instrument that I use a lot because it has that neoclassical sound. And it's really not that important which track you assign it to. You just want to have what's called a guide track, a reference point, so you know what to follow when you're recording. So here's what that track sounds like. And at this point, you could record the guitar tracks, but I think you'll get a better result if you start with what's called the basic tracks. And this is how it's done in the studio. The very first instrument that you record your guide track to is the drums, because the drums give like that rhythmic foundation for everything else. So you'll probably record better guitar parts that are more in time if you start with that drum track bass. Then we're going to add the bass along to the drums. And those two instruments together form the basic tracks. Now, I always start with a little hi-hat lead-in right here. Give us a little 4-beat count in. And I am in the score window here in Logic. So if you go out to the arrange window and you press Command 5, that takes you into the score window. Most people will program in the piano roll right here. And that's totally fine. You can do that. I personally like to look at the notes themselves so I get a visual sense of where things are frequency-wise in the mix. This helps me orchestrate better. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. So what I'm going to do is put a hi-hat bass in here that steals Lars's idea, right, from Enter Sandman. So what that idea is a hi-hat on the offbeat. It's basically like a 2 and 4 hit. So let's hear how that sounds. So you can hear our guide track there with the hi-hat. Perfect. That's what we want. Now, the next level of drums that happens in Enter Sandman is this like tom entrance. You know, Lars is beating on his toms, and it gives us this big thunderous sound. So I made a little tom part here, and that sounds like this. Great, right? So if you look at what I'm playing here, I have the kick drum, the floor tom, and then another floor tom. These are like the two heaviest toms you can get. So you combine all those together, and it's just a big, deep, heavy sound. Now, as we lead into our main riff here, we want to build intensity. So in this measure here, that's what I'm doing, just increasing the amount of notes basically that I'm playing so that we can really explode in our big crescendo. And the thing about drums is you can keep it simple and still be effective. A lot of times that less is more strategy works. Just get a strong rhythmic bass, a reference to your tempo, and that's where you want to start things off. You can always add additional layers of complexity and syncopation later, but initially you just want to get the idea going and have some strong energy behind it. So this drum part is really simple, to be honest, and these cymbals up here, which are these notes, add a lot. Just having that consistent, steady, high-frequency presence in the mix is really helpful. Little fill. Another lap of the main riff. Now, when it comes to writing drum parts, you have two options. You can either use a loop or you can program the drums yourself. And I program the drums myself because I'm looking for specific hits at certain times. It just gives you a little bit more control. And I'm using something called Easy Drummer, the plugin, which is this right here, to get the drum sounds. Now it's time to add the second aspect of the basic tracks, which is bass. Bass is, man, like we would be in deep trouble if there was no bass in the world. It's something that, you know, you don't hear first and foremost in the mix, but when you take it out of the mix, it just ruins everything. Like all of that power drops out of the sound. So I'm using a plugin here called Moto Bass, and I'm using the Rickenbacker model here because it's got a nice punchy, fat, thick tone. Sounds like that. Yeah, I mean, of course you could record a real bass here, but I kind of like the presence of artificial and real instruments all combined together. And as you'll see in a minute, I'm also going to add synth bass parts as well. So I'm going to put in a little bass part here. Again, it starts on that upbeat, you can see, which is just like this wonderful shock to the system. Boom! We get this jolt on the end of beat 4 here, right before the actual measure starts. And as you can see, I'm just playing one note here, which is the open low E string. I'm really just emphasizing the pedal tone. As I said with the drum parts, the same thing goes here. Keep it really simple when you're programming these parts, at least to start with. And once you have a strong foundation that just locks into a groove, feel free to explore some syncopated options. But what I notice happens is if you try to start complicated, you just end up sort of burning out, and because you can't find like that rhythm, you know, that locked in groove. And that's really what we're looking for first and foremost. So I just keep up that groove basically, and you can still see I haven't even changed notes. This is just all E. And there's other things going on in the mix, so we don't have to have the bass doing a whole lot. It's really there for a supporting role. Now there we can have a little bit of fun with this turnaround. I'm dropping down to a low C. That really hits hard. Up to a high C. And then descending down the E minor scale, I hit that chromatic riff that I'm playing in the guitar part. And we'll talk more about that in a minute too. Let's listen to a little bit of the bass and the drums here together and see what we got. Got a nice strong groove there. Okay, excellent. And what I like to do at this point is provide a little bit of additional texture in the bass part. So I'll take this bass and I'll copy it down to a synth bass sound. I use a lot of synth bass, and you may not even notice that unless you solo the track and hear it on its own. Whoa, right? It's like a totally electronic sound. I love that. And I'm even going to add another synth bass. So a big part of having a big sound is having a big instrument performing for us. You just have to have a lot of different instruments going on. So having multiple textures is huge. So let's hear what all three of these bass parts sound like together. Just a wall of bass. And see if you can pick out the difference between the bass guitar and the synth bass, right? There's that other synth bass. Very interesting sound. And then with the drums. And I always like leaving those little spaces in between the bass notes. This is something that is a part of almost every popular song. Playing an eighth note and then resting for an eighth note. Just that the play and then the absence of the space in the bass line really, really is effective. I don't know what it is about that, but it just sounds incredible. Now it's finally time to get to the best part, right? Which is recording the greatest instrument of all time, the guitar. Duh. And this is step 3. So what we're going to do is just knock out each one of these parts individually. Going to start with that song seed, and then we'll add some atmosphere with some effects, and then we'll do the main riff, a melody, and even a counter melody. Now to record, I'm using the HX Stomp, the Helix product here, and I have this clean channel dialed in, which I use a lot in my videos. It's a beautiful, rich texture full of delay and reverb, and it's almost like a synth pad, so you have this constant reference to your tonal bass. So we're going to use that patch, and I'm also panned all the way to the left side of the stereo field for this track. Let that reverb trail just hang out. Okay, good. Now the next step is to add some atmosphere. Atmosphere is a crucial part of just making your recording sound big, wide, and expansive. So I'm going to get back in here to my Helix, and I'm going to choose another tone. Which is, let's check this one. That is a great sound, right? I'm not even playing, but it's still playing. The gift of reverb. I love that. Now the strategy here is going to be playing that original chord, the song Seed, but in a higher octave here. So this is going to sound really rich and interesting. The effect will be like this. And we'll just kind of do that every measure or so. And for this track, I'm going to pan the opposite direction. So we're going to go hard right in the stereo field. Let it ring out. Now the final step for the atmosphere at the beginning is another organ patch, which I'm calling, let's see, Planet Shred. Sounds like this. Just a really expansive, spacey, epic sound. So now we're starting to get a good textural bass in the recording. A lot happening in the stereo field. Oh yeah. Crescendo. Now the next phase of the recording here is going to be the loud, heavy, distorted guitars, right? This is our main entrance, the most dynamic, exciting part of the track where we get to play that main riff. So I'm going to switch over to my main gain channel, and we don't want reverb or delay for this. Just a nice, dry, tight sound. So let's get that first part dialed in, and then we're going to do something called double tracking, which is the most important thing to get that big, heavy, distorted guitar sound. Good. There's the first track. And here's where the magic happens. You might have thought it was in the bedroom, but it's really in double tracking. And you can't copy and paste. Like if I just move this down here and copy and paste, it doesn't have the same effect. So we're going to do two unique performances, and the human mistakes and variation in how you're playing it really is what makes it magic. So listen to this. You have just the one guitar track. Now with two. Wow. Huge difference. So that is, I remember when I first figured that out, I submitted a recording to Metal Blade Records, and this is back in like the early 2000s, and they're like, hey man, your recordings sound kind of shitty. Try double tracking. I was like, what's double tracking? And it was then, I did some research and figured it out, and it just was like a complete game changer. Okay, we've got the atmosphere, we got the main riff. Let's add a melody here at the end of the song for an additional layer of interest. You always want new things to be happening in your song, just like movie plot points, oh shit, a new character enters the scene, or we found out something crazy about someone's past. That's the way you want your track to be. And I'm going to turn on my delay and my reverb. So now we just get this really thick atmospheric sound. You can hear the delay there and all the reverb too. And I'm going to keep the melody really simple here, just a nice soaring tone right on the top of everything else. It's going to be in its own frequency range. Yes. I got this pan in between here. Panning is so important because it gives everything space. If you just put everything in the center, then it's just a pile of garbage and you can't really distinguish or differentiate between the parts. Next, we're going to add the C word. Of course, I'm talking about a counter melody. So I'm going to go the other direction in the stereo field this time, but not hard right or hard left, just a little bit left there. So that's going to poke out and have its own little spot. And a counter melody is just another melody, but it might be in a different frequency range, and it has a little different arc or shape to it. So I'm going to try to follow the chord progression a little bit and see if we can get something to work here. And again, it's just about adding, these different layers of interest. Something is always happening. Action, action films sell the best at the box office. And if you can, really put a lot of action into your music, people will be more likely to listen to it. Excuse me, I got allergies here in Michigan. So there you can hear those two parts playing off each other. I think that's really fun. let's check it out. You know, they both kind of work together, but they could be independent, you know, subjects on their own. Now, the last thing that I'll typically do when recording a song, and this is step 4, is orchestration. And by orchestration, I mean adding other instruments, things like synths, choirs, and, you know, I might put a harp or a lute or a mandolin, you know, who knows. I think of this as compound texture. And whenever you have more than one instrument playing, you know, the same thing, or it could be different parts, it just adds, you know, additional layers of interest to the music. So I'm going to come down here to the organ. There's the effect. And I'm going to put in a part here that follows the chord progression here in the end. So I'm choosing, you know, to put the orchestration, I'm saving it for the end part. I could have it throughout the entire song, but this way you get more of that crescendo and the dynamic build. So let's hear that part. Very simple. And the idea is just going to be to layer the hell out of this. So I'm going to add other instruments with that same part, and we're going to get a big, thick tone. All together with the additional instruments, I've got, you know, an ambient guitar landscape, basically a synth effect. Dust World Sweep, that's another synth. The church organ, a couple choirs, a lute, and a harp. So here's how all that mess sounds. Yes, epic. Now the best part is when you've completed your track and you have all of these elements happening and you play it all together and it works great. I'm using a template here, you know, where I've worked on dialing in the frequency ranges and the mix and done a little like mastering and all of that so that I don't have to, you know, start from ground zero every time I record a song. So I'd highly recommend using a template that you dial in over time, but then when you get it sounding how you want it, just use that to write your new songs with so that you don't have to do all of those producing elements, you know, at the end. That's a lot of additional work. Our atmospheric guitars. Another layer of build, just like Enter Sandman. And here it comes. Get ready for the main riff. Whoops. Now I need to extend these guitars out because you can hear I missed the entrance there. Here we go. Boom. Melody and the counter melody. That reverb trail. Oh, it's the best part. I love that. Now for homework, what I'd love to see you guys do is record your own riff. So use some of the ideas that we discussed in this video and then post what you did in the Discord chat. A lot of us do that. I love checking out your guys' music, and we have some great composers. But the thing is wherever you're currently at, just roll with it. Don't worry about, you know, whether someone else is at a higher level or has more experience. The way that you get there is just reps. You know, just get in the ring and start taking some punches. I want to know what you think of this lesson format where I take a song and we talk about the emotional themes and the backstory. We watch a little bit of the media associated with it, like a music video, analyze, you know, the form and structure, and then we create our own song based on an idea from the track. Until next time, finger the G string till you're dead.